Ladies and gentlemen, we're now honored to have the former chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee of the U.S. Congress, Ileana Ros Lehtinen, born in Cuba, who understands so very well how important it is to keep raising a standard to encourage and to inspire the people of Cuba to realize that one day they will be free as well. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Ileana Ros Lehtinen.
Well, thank you very much. What great speeches my congressional colleagues have made. I am so pleased to be here at this important event. Good to see our ambassadors and our freedom fighters from around the world. This is indeed an important occasion. So many people devoted to freedom, devoted to democracy, and it was an honor for me to have received the TRUMAN-REAGAN Medal of Freedom from this terrific organization a few years ago. And I want to thank the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation for its incredible work, for its dedicated service to making this annual event possible. And I want to congratulate Dr. Yang Jianli for receiving this hard-earned and prestigious award. Just last week, as Dana pointed out, we remembered and commemorated the hundreds of brave Chinese students who were killed by the ruthless army on June 4th, 1989 at Tiananmen Square. So it is fitting that we honor Dr. Jianli, a survivor of this brutal massacre. Well-deserved honor. And I also, along with my colleagues, I want to give a good shout out to my wonderful friend, Annette Lantos, who is such a freedom fighter, such a proud promoter of democracy around the world. I had the unique gift and pleasure and honor to serve as the ranking member as her husband, the late Tom Lantos, chaired a very bipartisan committee at that time, our Foreign Affairs Committee, and there was no greater voice for freedom, for democracy, and for anti-communism than the voice of Tom Lantos, and we miss him dearly, Annette, so I know that you do as well, but you're carrying on his mission. Let's give it up for Annette Lantos. As you heard, I'm a victim of communism myself, so I understand the horrors that this misguided ideology has brought to the 11 million people enslaved in my native homeland, and it continues to bring terrible outcomes to millions of people around the world. While some people demanding freedom were able to overcome communism in Germany and in Poland and so many previously enslaved lands, many regimes, such as the one in my native homeland of Cuba, in North Korea, in Vietnam, and China, continue to oppress their own people and violate human rights on a daily, systematic basis. And just like so many victims of communism, my family had to flee communist Cuba and start a new life of freedom and democracy in this wonderful United States of America. And luckily for us, you know, some people don't have this great fortune. We were able to come to the United States, where freedom and democracy help provide bottomless opportunities for people of all backgrounds to fulfill and achieve any dream. And I know that that's true because I came here when I was only 8 years old, did not speak a word of English, and to think that an 8-year-old refugee girl with no English skills could rise and become the first Hispanic female of the United States Congress, and then being able to chair the Foreign Affairs Committee says all you need to know about the greatness and the opportunities that are available to everyone in this great country that we call home. And Tom and I, in the time that he was the chairman and I was the top Republican, the ranking member, we would always comment on the greatness of America, that here we are, two naturalized Americans, because Tom Lantos was not born here. As you know, I was not born here. Two naturalized Americans were in a committee where we set forth the foreign policy goals of the United States Congress. Is this a great country or what? Amazing. And as Dana pointed out, the Cold War may be over for historians, but let us not forget that the fight against communism is far from over, and much work still needs to be done. Just look at the tremendous differences that we see between countries led by communist regimes in the former East Germany, the current North Korea, and the countries of the same peoples living under freedom and democracy in the former West Germany and the current South Korea. What a stark difference you can see there. When comparing South Korea to North Korea, it takes less than the blink of an eye to see the stark differences between communism and freedom. South Korea's freedom and democracy grants its citizens limitless opportunities. North Koreans, meanwhile, are starving while their leaders live in luxury. And it wasn't too long ago when President Reagan said those famous words, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," as he stood in Berlin facing that horrid wall that separated families, separated loved ones between the worlds of freedom and the world of dictatorships. And still, even with the great efforts and much money that was invested into East German cities, there's still a clear difference in the quality of life in East Germany, causing many young people to flock to the former West German cities to seek better jobs and opportunities. It takes a long time for countries to recuperate from being shackled under the chains of communism. And I also want to say some brief remarks about the ongoing human rights violations occurring in communist regimes such as Vietnam and China. Just last week, I had the privilege to meet with leaders of the Vietnamese American community on Capitol Hill. As a Cuban American, I so identify with their concerns and their deep sorrow. Just like in Cuba, the regime, dissidents, and activists, they routinely face harassment. They face intimidation. They face imprisonment in Vietnam, same as in my native homeland of Cuba. So I have continued to press the State Department to list Vietnam as a country of particular concern. That's the category that they use. Why? Because Vietnam has a complete disregard for human rights. And I'm a proud sponsor of a bill in Congress, House Resolution 218, that calls for that designation. And regarding China, I hope that the President took the opportunity last week at that summit to bring up the gross human rights abuses that are committed each day under the brutal communist regime when he met with the leader of China. We always like to talk about the great economic accomplishments of China. Those people are living under an authoritarian rule. They may have limited economic freedoms, but there is no freedom until you have human rights respected and true freedoms respected. In China, you have religious intolerance. You have arbitrary and unjust court procedures. And not to talk about the forced abortions that are being committed, crimes against women every day in China's one-child policy that its rulers say doesn't exist. It doesn't exist if you have the money to pay your way out of that coercive policy, but it continues to be imposed upon women against their will. Now that's an inconvenient truth, and we want to look away because it's more comfortable for us to look away. But these abusive policies can't go ignored. We've got to face them. And while we continue to help those living under oppressive communist regimes throughout the globe, we must not forget about the people in our own hemisphere. As a victim of the Castro regime, I'm very concerned when I walk around college campuses and I see these young people with T-shirts of Che Guevara and the Castro brothers. You see it in Europe, you see it throughout the world, but you see it right here in our wonderful country. And I'm all for freedom of expression. They can wear those T-shirts, no problem in wearing them, no problem in selling them. But every time I see a young person with that T-shirt of Che Guevara, I stop and I ask them, do you know what this murderous thug has done throughout our hemisphere? Do you know how many people he relished killing? Not just in Cuba, but in so many other countries. So I'm always shocked that the students will wear these T-shirts, but I'm never hesitant to call them out on it and at least make them feel a little bit chagrined, so that they know that if they were to wear a T-shirt that Che Guevara would not have agreed with, Che Guevara would have just killed that person, as he did so many others. He was a sadistic, bloodthirsty tyrant. And throughout the last couple of months, I've had the opportunity to meet with pro-democracy advocates who've come from Cuba. They've come here to Washington with the same message, that the Cuban people are striving and doing everything that they can against an oppressive regime, and they're crying out for freedom, and they're no longer afraid. And these courageous individuals need our support. They expect some solidarity and our admiration, and I hope that each and every one of you will become more familiar with these new faces. These are the leaders of a free, democratic Cuba, and they are in jail, and they are beaten up, and they are harassed, people like the ladies in white. That is the future of a free Cuba. So we must stand in solidarity with pro-democracy advocates wherever they are, whether it's in Vietnam, whether it's in China, whether it's in Cuba, because these individuals are involved in a daily struggle against tyranny, against a brutal dictatorship that stops at nothing to hold on to power, and they will squash any dissent and anyone speaking out. And it's a moral obligation for all of us who live in freedom and democracy and enjoy all of these liberties to help people around the world attain the freedom and the democracy, so that all of us can live in an environment in which we can pursue the basic rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But it is also in our national security interest to eradicate communism once and for all from the face of the earth. As a strong supporter of human rights, individual liberties, freedoms, and a fellow victim of communism, I pledge my utmost support as a member of Congress to ensure that freedoms and liberties that sometimes we take so lightly and sometimes we take for granted can ultimately be spread everywhere. Let no corner be living under communism on this great earth. Muchísimas gracias, muy agradecida. Annette, it's a joy to see you, my friend. Thank you.